Christian parenting.
Welcome to Called to Love, where we discuss all things adoption and foster care and dive into the practical, the clinical, and most importantly, the biblical perspectives to help you and your family thrive. I'm Summer Colbert, adoptive mom, director of adoption and foster ministry, and champion for the Arkansas Baptist Children and Family Ministries. Adoption isn't just a process. It is an invitation to go on a journey with the Lord where you will experience life-changing opportunities to grow in your faith and learn to love in an entirely new way. One thing is for sure, being called to love means you will never be the same. Laura, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Summer, for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of your podcast.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. We're going to be talking today about your new release, More Than a Conqueror, a Christian Kid's Guide to Winning the War Against Worry. And as you and I were chatting about before we went live today, this is such a prevalent struggle for our kids and one that we as Christian parents need to know how to address. So I'm so grateful for your expertise and your message on this topic today. As we get started, would you share with us about your professional background and why you are passionate about helping kids win the war against worry?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So when I look back over my career, I kind of see three phases emerge. So phase one was kind of right after graduate school. I worked for a number of years in a community mental health clinic. I worked with kids between the ages of 3 and 18 on a variety of issues, behavior problems, depression, anxiety. I even was trained to do evaluations and treatment for kids who were survivors of sexual abuse. So I did that for a number of years. And then I transitioned to working primarily with parents, just supporting parents. And that was the time when I started my website and started writing and teaching parenting classes and running mom support groups, things like that. This was kind of like my kids' growing up years. So it was nice to be able to keep my foot in the field, but also be home and even homeschool them a little bit. So that was great.
Yeah.
And then phase three is sort of where I am now, which started a couple of years ago when I opened my private practice and now focus on providing individual therapy to women and moms. I primarily work with them on issues about anxiety and stress and work-life balance, life transitions, all the stuff that goes with being a mom and having to juggle it all.
Yes.
But it was really during that second phase that I had the idea for writing More Than a Conqueror. My son was about 9 at the time, and he was having some worries and some struggles. And I looked around for a workbook that I could do with him, because it's always good to do like concrete stuff with kids, So
Yes.
I tried to find a faith-based workbook. At the time, there wasn't any. So I thought, all right, I'll make one.
I love that.
So I just started making some worksheets on a Word doc, and we went through it. And when we were done, I thought maybe I could kind of expand on this and make it available to more people. So I worked on it here and there, and then how things happen, fizzles. I kind of put it aside, and then the pandemic hit, and God started to nudge me and say, all right, I think it's time. We were seeing some really startling statistics on mental health, increased service needs and things like that for kids of all ages. So so then I got really worked hard on it, and I'm thankful that it's now available as a resource for families.
Yes, absolutely. I can share on a very personal level right now that, and I was sharing with Laura before we hit record on today's episode, that I have a daughter who struggles severely with anxiety and fear, and it is crippling for her at times, and it's a big challenge to us just as a family unit. And so I'm so grateful that you were obedient to that nudge, because we are actively going through the book right now, and it's something that she looks forward to. Normally, bedtime can be anxiety inducing for her, and instead right now she's looking forward to going to bed because she knows that's when we're going to read a chapter in More Than a Conqueror.
Oh, that warms my heart.
Yes. So I absolutely share that on that personal level, just to encourage you who are listening today that, and I understand that need for resources. Our daughter who struggles with fear and anxiety is adopted. And so there's that component there that we always have to factor in and wondering, the why behind it. And we know that behavior communicates a need, but we also know that on this side of heaven where sin has broken much, right, there are struggles that we have in our flesh, and some are more bent towards that anxiety and that fear. And it doesn't necessarily have to be adoption or trauma as a factor. But I'd love to give you an opportunity just in your area of expertise to speak to this. What are these contributing factors that you see maybe collectively for those who tend to struggle with anxiety and worry and fear? Would you speak to that for us for a moment? Maybe help us to understand as we dive into our conversation today. I know for me personally, I can deal with a behavior better if I understand a why behind it. So, can you give us a little bit of why just to get us started, Laura?
Yeah, sure. Wouldn't it be great if we had like a secret decoder ring as parents? We could just be like, oh, this
Absolutely.
is what's going on. And then it gives you some sort of little tip on what to do, because that's the underlying motive for the behavior. But yeah,
Yes.
so it is really helpful to kind of like pause and think about, okay, what's going on here for my kid? And I think the first thing to remember, particularly about anxiety and fear, is that these are protective mechanisms that God has given us.
Right.
Like you said, we live in
Yeah.
this fallen world and things are broken and bad things can potentially happen. So it
Right.
can get off kilter, which we'll address later, but it is a protective mechanism that is designed to keep us safe in this world where there are dangers. So that's important to keep
Yeah.
in mind, that the feeling isn't bad, the response isn't bad. It's just sometimes how we choose to respond to it that can become problematic. The other thing that
Yes.
I think is helpful for parents to remember is that kids are not mini adults. We don't share a lot of the same characteristics and traits. Their brains are underdeveloped and still a work in progress. For
That's good.
better or worse, they don't have the ability to mask. We grow up learning, okay, you don't do this in this context, you don't do that in this context, but kids just kind of do whatever they want, wherever they want. They are what you would call like external processors of their emotions. So instead of ruminating or getting it stuck inside, they tend to display it with behaviors. So, and then also just to remember, kids lack skills. They don't come wired knowing how to cope with difficult feelings. So, helping parents remember, okay, let me look at this from maybe three things. Let's look at it from a developmental standpoint. Where is my child developmentally? What can my expectations be for where they are at for who this child is? Are my expectations aligned with that? And then two, what skills are they lacking? What could they use here that maybe they don't have right now? And maybe attacking it from that perspective. And then as Christian parents, we also want to look at the heart, right? We always want to look and see like what could be an underlying heart issue, and exploring that from really a gentle discipleship kind of response, being okay, so maybe there's some confession that needs to happen, maybe a little repentance, and then maybe making amends for what went wrong. But I like that roadmap of development, skills, and then heart orientation, because it can keep us with that big picture perspective on what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. I love that because it is difficult as parents. We forget because we're just trying to get through the day to day. And most of us are overwhelmed by our to do list, by our responsibilities. And so when a child acts out and they are communicating to the best of their ability a need, some kind of a struggle that they're experiencing, we're just want to quick to fix it
Yeah.
and then sweep it under the rug and move on because we just need to get about our day. But I appreciate you sharing that and even describing it as a roadmap because it's not a personal attack. These kids are not trying to make us miserable. They're not trying to ruin our day. They're just trying to communicate a need. And like you're saying, they're trying to build skills. And here's the ouch part of it for us as parents, they're learning one way or another.
Yeah.
They are learning coping skills, whether they're healthy or unhealthy. And so we as parents have been given the responsibility to teach them and give them those tools and give them ways to express, give the tools of language, give the
Yeah.
tools of explanation, all these different things. And so that can be really, really convicting for me as a busy mom because I've got a to-do list a million miles long and it never fails. Those behaviors creep in at the worst possible moments, right?
Yeah.
And so, whether you have a child who has experienced trauma, who has experienced abandonment or abuse or any kind of anything like that, or you just might have a child whose personality leans towards that, we do need to become students of our children and
Yes.
take the time to be intentional parents, to learn our child and to meet them in that
Mm,
need and to help them grow and develop into healthy adults, right? So that they
yes.
can go on and perpetuate that as well. I think, too, I really appreciate that explanation. And I want to take it a step further for you and just have you explain for us a little bit more of what's going on in our child's bodies
Mm.
when that fear response takes over, when their brain is telling them you should be afraid. There's an external threat that you're responding to. We understand that from teaching trauma, but for those who may be new to this, who are like, yay, finally a resource who helps me understand, a little bit of what's going on with my kiddo, explain a little bit about what's going on in the brain and how that translates to their bodies and then ultimately to their behavior.
Yeah, happy to. So the brain and the body are really intimately connected in this process, sending feedback both directions, the brain down to the body and the body back to the brain. And, there's a lot of interesting research going on. There's functional MRIs. They're looking to see what parts of the brains are it's firing for certain reactions and responses. But big, 30,000 view perspective is that there's two main parts of the brain that are involved in a response to a threat. The first is what you would call your threat detector or the amygdala. And it's in this part of the brain that it is always scanning the environment. It's always looking for threat. It's like that smoke detector outside your kitchen. It's there, it's not doing anything, but it's constantly scanning, looking for something that could potentially go wrong. The other part of your brain is more like that thinking part, where it's responsible for reasoning and problem solving and figuring things out and weighing the good and bad. This part of your brain is actually a lot slower to respond to threat than the amygdala. The signals get wired through this other part of your brain, and it's like a speedway to the amygdala. So that's why if you're sitting at the kitchen table and your kid comes up behind you and says, boo, you jump. You have this physiological response. It's not until you turn and you look and that thinking part of your brain can be like, oh, it's just my goofy kid giving me a hard time. And you smile and you shrug it off. Maybe your heart will still be beating because you're still having that physiological response, but your thinking brain has
Right.
taken over and said it's not an actual real threat. The problem with the amygdala is that it cannot tell the difference between real and imagined threat. So your kid running in front of a car, real threat. A fire, it's a real threat. Someone coming towards you in an aggressive manner, that's a real threat. A worry about, who am I going to sit with at lunch today? Or is mom going to be okay while I'm at school? These are imagined threats. But the amygdala can't really tell the difference between the two. And it is wired to motivate you to action. It's not an observing part of your brain, it's an action oriented. So it wants you to fight back, it wants you to flee, it wants you to do something. And when we actually have real threat, like if we're in the jungle and a lion is chasing us, we want to run, we want to get away, we want to do something. But if it's an imagined threat, it gets stuck. And so this energy that our body is now responding with heart beating, sweaty palms, all the other things, blood flowing to our extremities so we can run or fight back. It's all of this energy is there, but it's not a real threat, so we can't do anything with it. So it gets stuck in what I call this worry cycle. And it just kind of
Yeah.
grows and grows. And if we stay in that place, we're just going to continue to experience anxiety and worry.
Yes, that's a great explanation. And I really appreciate what you said earlier about the choice that we have to make because we do have those two parts of the brain functioning, and God has designed us beautifully that way. But we do have to make a choice. And as parents, going back to our previous point, we've got to teach our kids how to choose well so that their bodies aren't negatively affected and that those negative thinking patterns aren't established where they take root deeper than the positive habits. And so, I mean, I know right now with my 8-year old daughter, we are going through a thing of, we'll have some type of a situation or scenario that she's just dreading because all she can think about is what could go wrong.
Yeah.
And she'll even say that, what if this, that, and I'll look at her and I'll just get right in her sweet little eyes and I'll grab her face and I'll go, but honey, what if it's wonderful?
Yeah.
What if it's good? What if you have the best time ever? Whatever it is that she might be fearful of, but she's so consumed
Yeah.
by the fear of the negative and what scares her that she doesn't allow herself to experience the good. And a lot of times as a mom, I'm trying to discern, where do I push and where do I bend
Yeah.
as a parent? Because I can see the good on the other side of it. And when I can nudge her and really help her to get on the other side of it, she's so glad that she's done it. But getting there can be a real challenge because that fight or flight response, listen, she's fierce. I'm telling you. I mean, just God made that girl to be strong and she's fierce. And so sometimes we really get in those battles of she's just putting her foot down because her brain is just telling her, no, this external threat is just absolutely
Yeah.
debilitating for me. So when we're in those really, and I guess I'm thinking towards like power struggles with our kids because that hinders our relationship and our trust and our connection with our kids. So where is the best place for us as parents to begin so that we're not in those taking it personally, butting head, power struggles with our kids, understanding the way that you've explained what's going on in their brain and body? Where's the best place for us to begin as we address the challenges and the behavior that they're exhibiting as a result of what their brain is telling them?
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize, I think you mentioned this earlier about the fact that there are certain things that come wired in kids. I can give you an interesting example. So, my daughter has sensitive hearing, and she's had that since day one, actually pre day one, because when she was in my womb, I remember dropping things in front of my belly on a counter or opening my son's Velcro strap on his sandal, and she would jump. It would startle her. This is how she came wired. Nothing happened to her. She was not even outside of my womb yet. So this
Wow.
is innate wiring. And so personality is a little more flexible. It's more malleable based on your experiences and your environment. Temperament is sort of fixed. It's sort of like how God knit you together in your mother's womb. It's like your unique wiring. And there's some general consensus that there are a handful of temperament traits that people have in varying degrees that are stable throughout lifetime. And these are things like activity level. You've got some kids that just come out and they're running, they're off. And there are other kids who are more sedentary. That's just their innate wiring. Some kids have a high level of adaptability. They can take change really well. Some can't. Some have a really high threshold for sensory input. Some have a really low one. These are innate temperament traits that pretty much stay fixed throughout your lifetime. So remembering that when you look at your child and say, okay, this is how my kid is wired, this is how God has made them, allows you to work within how they are actually wired. But if your child does have like these maybe difficulty with adaptability or some low threshold for sensory input, they could be more at risk for developing anxiety because those things kind of go hand in hand, and it does activate their threat response a little bit more. So it's helpful to kind of have this lens because it allows you to sort of see it through compassion and empathy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's so helpful for me to understand this better. And what I wouldn't have given 10 years ago when I started my journey because we had two biological boys before when we were beginning our family, and then God called us into the journey of adoption. And I was so ill equipped. I
Mm,
had no idea. But the more I have learned just about childhood development and the response of the brain, and like you're saying, the what's malleable and what's not, and what's innate, and all of those different things, it really has helped to free me as a parent and realize that my children's struggles are not necessarily my fault.
yes.
And I think you probably speak to that a lot with moms with anxiety because we carry the weight of our children's success so much. And so when we see a child who is just really hindered by fear and anxiety, or whatever their struggle might be, because we live in a fallen, sinful world. So we all struggle with something, but today's topic is certainly anxiety and worry. And so it's helpful for us as parents, I think, to not feel like everything's our fault. And so I'd like
Mm,
to give you an opportunity just to speak to that as you work with both kids and parents alike in this struggle, because as moms, we just want to fix it
yeah,
because we love our
I
kids and we don't want to see
know.
them
I
struggle. But
know.
for whatever reason, this is where their bent is. And so as we work with our kids as we, go through this parenting journey together, how would you speak to the mom right now that's like, oh my goodness, Laura, you're saying this isn't all my fault and I haven't failed as a mom from the moment this child was in my womb, that sort of a thing. I think maybe I would have loved to have heard from you 10 years ago when I felt like I was living in perpetual mom failed.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
take a moment to speak to that for us.
Yeah, so, we kind of use kids as like this mirror that reflects whether we're doing a good job or a bad job. And so when we have that sort of mindset, it causes us to go into that quick shut it down mode, because if our kid is acting up or having some sort of struggle, we see that as a flaw or a fault in us. So every
Right.
time we see that, every time that bubbles up in front of us, it creates in us this thing that we don't like. I don't like that about myself. I don't want to see that. So the best way
Yes.
to get rid of that feeling in yourself is to get rid of the behavior in your kid. And so it can lead to this sort of like fix it now mentality where you're
Yeah.
just going around playing whack-a-mole all day, getting rid of bad behaviors in any way you
Yeah.
can quickly. Maybe it's a kid who's struggling with something and you can just quickly just appease them, give them whatever they want, because that makes that behavior go away. Or if your child's
Right.
anxious, you can do whatever you can to just sort of quickly, let me just make it easier for them, make the situation really easy. But when we go into this sort of fix it at all costs mode, we can strip kids of the ability to really look inside and be like, oh, I have some resources within me that I can use to,
Yes.
to help me in this situation. And that constant need to kind of squelch that behavior can also send the kids the message like, oh, I'm not capable. I need mom to rescue me all the time.
Great
And for
point.
kids who are anxious, that actually will fuel anxiety, because if I'm not capable, then I do need people. And then it like just you get that spiral going.
Yes.
So when we find ourselves in that sort of like fix it mode, let's make it better, I can't have this behavior around me anymore, I just really encourage parents to take a deep breath. Ask yourself, is this an emergency? And if it's not, then remind yourself this is not an emergency. And if it is an emergency, then you probably shouldn't have taken the breath. You should just do what you need to do to fix it. But most of the time, it's not an emergent situation. And to get a little perspective, take a step back, look at your child from that kind of roadmap we described before. Okay,
Yeah.
developmentally, okay, what is the skill that they need? Is there a heart issue? Like, let's take a step back and look and see what it is that needs to be addressed in this moment, and what skill can I teach right now? So maybe your kid's having a meltdown. If they're not at full fight flight mode, you can actually help them dial it back. If they've already gone there, if they're on a 10, 0 to 10, then that
Yeah.
thinking part of their brain is offline. You won't be able to reach them. You can do what you can do to
Yeah.
kind of help calm them down. But if they're not quite there yet, if they're more at a 4 or 5, you can say, okay, let's do a quick breath prayer. Let's just ask God to help us. A deep breath in. God is with me. He's never going to leave me or forsake me. Like, let's just do that right now, real quick. It's it's a fix it sort of, but not in a way where you're trying to squelch it. You're trying to give them tools. You're trying to give them
Yes.
skills in the moment. And then later, like after if your kid has had a blow up and you've had a blow up back, take a moment later and go back and revisit it and say, look, that was hard before. I didn't like what I saw in me. I know you didn't like. Let's talk about this. Where did things go wrong?
Yeah.
What could we do differently next time? And as it depends on your kid's personality, but you might even want to like act it out, do some role play. Okay, if we could rewind the tape, let's go back in time, let's play it through again with a different outcome. What would have helped you? Get
Right.
them thinking like, oh, it would have been really helpful if I could have done like 10 jumping jacks right then, or if you could have
Yeah.
given me a hug. Like, figure out what would have worked for them in that moment and then practice that
Yes.
together when things are not tense, and then they'll have access to those skills when things do get hard.
Oh my goodness. That is so good. And there's so much to what you just said because what I'm hearing and what I love about this conversation is that there's no expectation that we have to parent our kids perfectly in order to fix them from anxiety and worry.
No.
That is not our place. It is our job to walk through this with our kids and to be an anchor in the early days as we're training them and teaching them and giving them those tools so that they are able to be successfully launched and can function well and knowing that they can rest in. And I love that because it is true. kiddos who are allowed to stay in that perpetual cycle, that worry cycle that you talk about, they cling on for dear life to anybody that can anchor them, but oftentimes they end up pulling them down in their chaos and
Yes.
wanting them to join that unhealthy habit of
Right.
living in this chaos all the time. And that's not healthy for anybody. And let's be frank, it can break up families. I mean, I have
Mm.
seen this so much in kiddos who have been adopted and have come from very traumatic backgrounds and really struggle with their trauma, and one parent becomes that figure that they attach to and that anchor that they have in their
Yeah.
chaos. And if it's not regulated well, it can really cause discord with other children in the home, certainly with your spouse. And there is a high divorce rate
Mm.
amongst families who, especially special needs or high need when it comes to trauma level and that sort of a thing. And I'm sure you can speak to that too, Laura. But it's really important for us to remember that it's not our job to fix, but it is our job to guide.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point of this conversation today and all of that. And I also appreciate the fact that you're talking about its ebb and flow. And I love that rewind analogy and being able to go back and rebuild trust through apologies, through de escalation, and all the things. And then saying, what did you need in that moment?
Mm.
And let's learn from it and grow together and do better next time. But I feel like for those of us, and I want to ask this question because I like to have a plan. Okay. I mean, I admit I like control and I like to have a plan in place. And so for parents like me, and really for any parent whose kiddo does struggle with worry and anxiety and fear, it's not a question of if, but it's a question of when
Yeah.
your child is going to escalate, and the different scales of escalation and how that behavior manifests. What are some good practical steps for us as parents to have at the ready mentally and even practically? Like, for example, a lot of times behavior can be solved really quickly with blood sugar regulation, and so a
Yes.
snack. So give us
Yeah.
some really practical things that we as parents can have in our own toolbox as we build our kiddos toolbox.
Yeah, definitely. So it's important to always assess for physiological, physical needs. Is there a sleep issue? Is there a hunger issue? Is there, something, if the kid's got sensory issues, are they uncomfortable in some way? Are they wet? Is there fabric scratchy? Just do kind of a general head to toe assessment, like figure out what could be bothering them physically. And also for kids who struggle with anxiety, it's really good to have a roadmap for your day as far as like, a
Yes,
routine, a predictability. And I want to say like flexibly structured. You don't want to have rigidity because that can actually facilitate
that's good.
additional anxiety because then they're going to be like, oh, I didn't have this at this time. That makes me anxious.
Right.
That's like a safety seeking
Yes.
behavior. So you want to have flexible structure to your day. So maybe certain checkpoints of the day are predictable. I come home from school and I have a snack and I cuddle with the dog and I, go for a jog around the house. I don't know. Whatever you come up with is the thing that this child can predictably respond to. Another thing I love to suggest to parents is to kind of create an emotional baseline to your day in the morning. So mornings kind of set the stage for the day. If you wake up and everyone's
Right.
chaotic, you're kind of going to have this flavor of the day projected on the day. So finding a way to kind of work in a time of just connection and prayer with your kids before they go to school would be great. So maybe it's at the breakfast table
Yeah.
or maybe it's in the car, and really narrowing in on what do my kids need today. And you could say, hey, what are you excited about today? What are you looking forward to? And also, what are you worried about? What do you think is going to be hard today?
Yeah.
Ask both of those questions to each of your kids, and you can gather information about what's on their heart, what they're worried about, and then it gives you an opportunity to pray for them out loud. You can pray over
Mm.
them and ask God to be with them, to show them where He is in those moments that they're anticipating will be hard. And then it gives you that
Yeah.
insight into, like, okay, what are you going to need to handle that in that moment when you're there in the situation that you're concerned about. So kind of creating that baseline for the day, looking ahead. Yeah, I think it's also important to just help kids have resources that they can utilize. So, like you said, if mom or dad is the only touch point in the day, the only thing that makes them feel safe, then without that, they can't feel comfortable. So, you could do things like creating a little quiet corner in your house. So, or take elements of that quiet corner with them and tuck it in their pocket. So maybe it's got like a weighted blanket, or it's got some scents on a cotton ball they like, or an iPod with, nature sounds or music they enjoy, and just create this space. Maybe it's under the stairs or in a closet where they feel safe and they feel contained, and that they can go and find that resource within themselves. So they could take elements of that with them. Could they take like a stress ball with them in their pocket? Could they take that scent to smell periodically? Something that will help kind of just ground them and make them feel comfortable. And then, what that does over time, it's like, look, I had a need and I took care of it. I was able, and that feeling of
Yeah.
success will breed more and more.
That's wonderful. Those are really great practical suggestions. And as you were talking about that, I wanted to add to my question because we are entering a time where kiddos are back in school. And so it can be really important for us as parents to effectively communicate our kids' needs to their teachers.
Yeah,
And because our teachers are trying to manage classrooms of 20 plus kids, and so sometimes our kids needs get lost in the mix of all of that, and so then it comes out as poor behavior and all we're hearing is the negative behavior at
right,
school.
right.
Can you speak to that for a moment in the best way that we can honor our children, honor their struggle, not just go and bash our kids to the teacher basically, but what's a great way for us to communicate with our children's schools and their teachers, maybe their child caregivers at church and those sort of environments? What's the best way that we can set them up for success when they're away from us outside of the home in those other caregiving situations?
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea to be proactive. I think parents tend to be like, okay, no news is good news, so I'm just going to ignore the
Right,
situation until, there's some sort of fire I need to put out. But if you
right.
know that your child struggles in certain venues, in certain areas, then be proactive. Go and meet without your child there. I think it's best to go and meet with just the adult and have an honest conversation. These are things that are triggering for my kid. These are situations that are hard. This is what I have found has worked. Most caregivers, most teachers, Sunday school teachers want to know those things. They want to know what's been
Yeah,
successful for you in the past. So you can
right.
just outline that for them, what has worked, what's been successful. And then you can also talk with the teacher about like what is an option for them. Like, what do you have as resources in your classroom that I could talk to my child about at home, knowing that this is an option? Okay, so you
Yeah,
do have this little book nook. You could go and sit in that if you want to. I mean, I know that there are IEPs and stuff that they get for kids that will, write these things into it, but have a dialogue about what is available to my child if in the moment he or she needs it, and then letting your child know these resources are available to you at school.
yeah,
And then if you are
yeah,
implementing some sort of like plan with your kid, make sure the teacher knows. So if your kid has historically a really hard time separating from you, they've got separation anxiety, they don't want to get off the bus, they don't want to get out of the car. If you've got some sort of plan in place where you're going to walk them, all the way one day, three-quarters of the way next day, half, like talk to the teacher, let them know what your plan is so they can support you and help facilitate that.
yes. Oh, I think that's great. That's really, really good advice. And it brings peace of mind collectively for everybody involved. And that goes to what you were talking about earlier of your child knows there's a plan
Yes.
and that you have, because you care and because their teacher cares or their school cares, that just helps to contribute to that safety feeling that they need when their brain's trying to tell them otherwise.
Right,
So it
right.
really is that collective response. And I really appreciate that example. I was thinking through what you were talking about a moment ago, and I wanted to circle back to it just for a moment. When we're talking about when our kids are at a certain level of escalation, you cannot reach their logical brain. They are once, and we talk. Some of the other TBRI talks about the lid being flipped. Once you flipped your lid, you have to go through a de-escalation process to help reach that logical brain again. And so do you have, based on your experience, just really helpful de-escalation techniques that you would recommend to our families who they know at some point their kiddo is going to hit that lid flipping moment?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is get a roadmap for what the path is to that de-escalation, because they usually don't come out of nowhere. You got to tune yourself into what are my child's vulnerabilities. Is it an
Yeah,
amount of stimulation, overwhelm? Like, is it a new environment? Is it when they are tired or hungry? You got to look for those kind of foundational vulnerabilities, and then look for mounting triggers. Tune into your kid. Look for, okay, now they're starting to clench their fists. I know something's coming. And
yeah,
intervene, find things that are effective to intervene at that level. Because you're right, once they hit that full-blown meltdown. You're not going to be able to talk them out of it. As
Right.
far as like how to de-escalate once they're in that mode, unfortunately, it's just a little bit of trial and error, figuring out what works.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's let's run in place. You know, because some kids are going to need to use that energy up. They've actually it's been interesting. Some people who struggle with panic attacks, sometimes you just prescribe go for a run while you're in the midst of it,
Yeah.
because you're doing what your amygdala wants you to do. Run. It's saying run. So when you
Yeah, that's
run, you
great.
actually are doing what it's asking you to do, and it can calm back down. So usually it's some sort of high energy thing or breathing. Although some anxious kids get, so when you inhale, you're actually activating your sympathetic nervous system, which can create a feeling of anxiety. So breathing techniques sometimes in that heightened state are going to actually make you feel more anxious, because that inhale actually feels worse. It's the exhale. So if you can get them to just breathe
Okay.
out, just focus on a strong exhale, can actually,
Okay.
instead of focusing on the in breath, you can focus on the out breath.
That's
Yeah,
great.
so it's going to have to be a body-based thing in order to get them out of that. Maybe they like a real strong bear hug for mom to help them feel contained. And you might try that and might kick and scream and say, get out of here. You know, like, again, it's a little
Yeah.
bit trial of error, trying to figure out what works for your particular kid. But think more in terms of actions and body-based things rather than cognitive or, logic-based interventions.
Okay. That's good. That's really good advice. It's very helpful just for us to know as parents what that go to approach needs to be. And you do bring up a great point that it might work really well 3 times in a row. And then on that fourth time, that is not what that child needs. And it ends up making it worse. And so we
Yeah.
do have to be flexible as parents and understand and not resent our
Yeah.
children for when it's hard. And I think anybody who struggles with this and has a child who struggles with this, resentment can creep in. And so
Yeah.
we as parents have got to stand guard and regulate ourselves before or when we see this coming on. We've got to get ourselves in a place of, all right, let me get my footing. I'm bracing myself. I see that it's coming. Let's do this. And
Yeah.
I'm here with you and I'm here for you and I'm not going to leave you and I'm going to work through this with you. And that's a really good reminder for us as parents when you're like, oh my gosh, we're in public and everybody's going to see and this is going to be disastrous. And then we start to escalate and then our child is escalated and it's just explosive at that point. And so it's really, really good for you to do this with your child so that you're de-escalating together in those
Yes.
tense moments.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
and it's really good that you talk about just that physiological response and really how the body does take over and how it almost it dictates our behavior in those moments. And so I think about that from the faith perspective because we're talking to Christian parents here and how many times in our struggles that people have spoken to really just wounding in the body of Christ because people say things well meaning, but they feel thoughtless at the time of, well, you struggle with anxiety, you just need to pray more. Or, your faith just isn't strong enough. And so you need to read your Bible more and that sort of a thing. And so as we're wrapping up our conversation, I really want to go to that balance between because God has gifted us with this clinical perspective, right? And the scientific understanding of how he made our bodies. But then there's that faith component that we want to make sure encompasses everything that we do with our kids and how we relate to our kids and how we're helping them to grow as they walk through this struggle. So, speak to how we as parents can speak against those falsehoods of you just need to pray more, you just need to have more faith, but really tying into dependence on the Lord fully, but where they understand that it's relationship and not rules and condemnation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really starts a lot with modeling, and showing kids how you use both prayer, scripture, the body of Christ to come alongside you when you're struggling. And obviously, you would want to use some discretion and not share, things with your kids that maybe wouldn't be appropriate. But I mean, even small things like just narrating your own personal experience of something as simple as maybe driving to the doctor's office and you get stuck in traffic and you don't want to be late and you start to get that, oh, sweaty palms and you're starting to get a tense chest or something, and you can say, boy, I'm really noticing my body is getting tense. I'm really noticing that things are, heating up for me. Okay, I'm going to do a deep breath and I'm going to pray. And your kids are watching, they're observing, they're seeing where your
That's right.
resource is for your strength. The other thing I would encourage parents to do is to talk to kids about Jesus's own struggles with
Yeah.
anxiety and anguish. And people would say, oh, no, that's not true. But if you look at the story of the Garden of Gethsemane, and it says that Jesus was in anguish and his sweat was like drops of blood, if
Yeah.
that is not a threat response, then I don't know what is. And to
Yeah.
really read that story with them. And if you take all four accounts of that through the Gospels, it's this really beautiful, rich picture of how Jesus kind of dealt with his own distress. And we see like three parts to it. One, he asked people to come with him. He asked his disciples, come and keep watch with me. He knew being alone
Yeah.
wasn't good. And so we too can encourage our kids and we can model for them. And he also shared his pain. One translation says that my pain is so great, I feel like I might die. And so he shared what was on his heart
Mm.
with people. Obviously, they weren't great. They fell asleep
Yeah.
and they kind of, weren't great support. But we can
Right.
still use that model as like how Jesus reached out, had people around him, and he told them what was on his heart. And then he also prayed fervently. And so we can do that with our kids. We can pray, take everything to the Lord in prayer, and just really show them that even Jesus prayed fervently. And then I love this little nugget of
Yeah.
hope that's in that gospel story of God didn't take away what Jesus was at. He said, if there's another way to get this around this cross, please show it to me. And God was like, no,
Right.
there's no other way. But he sent angels to comfort him. And so I think with
It's
anxiety, it
good.
can be like, I just want to get rid of it. I just want it to be gone. But God may say, no, that's not my path for you right now. But keep your eyes open because I'm going to provide you strength. I'm going to provide you comfort. And it may come from a place that you're not expecting, and helping our kids see, to have
Yeah.
these lenses and these eyes that look for the way that God is there providing for him, and to just cultivate this attitude of gratitude, really, about how God is still
Yes.
in the picture and still ministering to them.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. What a great reminder as we close out today, because we all need that reminder, right? Whether we struggle severely with anxiety, we all have things that concern us, and he even says in scripture that he will send his angels to guard. And so that is just wonderful for us to know as we close out our conversation today. And I want to make sure that our listeners can get a copy of your resource that you have so beautifully written, More Than a Conqueror, a Christian's Guide to Winning the War Against Worry. Where can they connect with you and get a copy of this resource?
So it's available on Christian book distributors. Actually, I think they're having a sale right now, and also Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And if they want to connect with me, they can reach out to me through my website, which is cornerstones with an S for parents.com. I also have a monthly newsletter, and if you sign up for it, you get a free 5-day parenting refresh guide for Christian parents.
Absolutely. Listeners, I will have that in today's show notes for you to quickly and easily access. And if today's episode has really encouraged you, drop us a line. There will be a link for you to reach out to me and respond with any follow up questions or comments. I would love to hear from you. We want to be able to continue to serve you in the topics that are concerns in your hearts and in your households. And this is definitely one that has been such a blessing to me personally. And so we want to continue to serve you in that way with the things that you're walking through the day to day and parenting. And so, Laura, thank you so much for being my guest today. It has been a pleasure and a blessing to hear from you.
Thank you so much for having me here, Summer.